And welcome to today's lesson. Today we want to look at carbon cycle. In our last lesson we talked about water cycle. So today we are going to see how carbon is circulated in the ecosystem, or what we call the carbon cycle. Carbon is one of the most important chemical elements that we have. Every living thing is made up of carbon, and most of the components in our body, our food, the bone, our blood, cells, and other components of our body, they are made up of carbon. So carbon is very essential in the ecosystem for the survival of every living thing. In fact, no living thing can survive without carbon. Now this carbon, we get them through carbon dioxide in the environment or in the atmosphere. Normally the air we breathe in, it contains carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is the old name. Carbon dioxide is the new chemical name for it, for carbon dioxide. So the air contains it. So when we take in air, we are also taking in carbon dioxide, and through respiration we give carbon dioxide to the environment. And also when living things die, plants and animals, when they die and they are decomposing, they also give out carbon sources. Now let's see the carbon cycle. This is carbon cycle. I say that a nutrient cycle is a form of a cycle for a nutrient source that has a cyclic path or a circular path. Just like this carbon cycle, you can see that it has a path that is like a circle, and that is why we call it carbon cycle, because it is carbon that is involved in this cycle. Now this cycle shows how carbon is given out to the environment and how the carbon in the environment is being used. There is a balance between the giving of carbon in the environment and the use of carbon in the environment. If there are excess, or if there is excess carbon in the environment, it will normally lead to problems. For instance, human beings, we cannot tolerate too much carbon in our body. When the carbon in our body, or carbon dioxide in our body, becomes too much, it leads to problems. So the environment has a way of regulating it to make sure that it is not too much and not too low in the environment. So this carbon cycle shows how these carbon sources are regulated, so that the carbon in the environment is not always too high and is not always too low. Now the main source of carbon in the environment is the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is CO2. Now during photosynthesis, CO2 in the atmosphere is used by plants to produce carbohydrates. And now the carbohydrates in the plant is either eaten by an animal like goats. A goat may eat the plant and get the carbohydrate being manufactured by the plant. And then man will eat goats, and then man will respire or breathe out. When we breathe out, we are breathing out carbon dioxide. So when we breathe out or respire, then the carbon dioxide in our body will come out and then move back to the environment. The plant also, when it dies, organisms that we call decomposers that help dead organisms to decompose, like earthworm, they will feed on the plant, and when they feed on the plant, birds they eat earthworms. So when the birds eat earthworms, man eats birds. So when man eats birds and man respires again, so the carbon again in the plant is now moved back to the atmosphere, and then it continues to regulate like that. And that is why people are advised to plant plants around their house, or trees around their house, so that these trees they can take up excess carbon dioxide around them, because excess carbon dioxide is not good for our body. So when we plant trees, they use carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, and therefore reduce the carbon dioxide that is available in our environment. So this is it about carbon cycle.